So, good evening, everyone. This is Daylon over here. I am the founder and design educator at CuriousCore. We are a digital design school that focuses on helping mid-career professionals build their portfolio to transition into UX design. So, we've been organizing weekly webinars for the community since middle of May because COVID hit, and the fact that COVID hit meant that many events were canceled, right, on offline. And as a result, there was a lack of Asia Pacific specific content on user experience design, and also a lack of events in general for designers to learn from each other. And I thought it would be a good idea to reach out to friends and get them to share a little bit about how they practice user experience design in the work that they do. We've interviewed people from Grab, we've interviewed people from DBS, and many, many others. And tonight we have a special guest. His name is David Khoo. He is the senior consultant at Foolproof, a user experience practice based in London and also in Singapore. So they actually operate both in London and Singapore. At the same time, I'm going to share a little bit about David and his bio. His official bio actually. And let me just. So David is a self-professed design research and business strategy junkie, and he experiments with different methodologies. And often he combines methodologies, triangulates to the truth, and uses the insight to work with product and design teams to chart the way forward. And to him, design has become an intervention to help organizations to bridge and confront social realities. And as a senior consultant, he actively champions and shapes the research and strategy practice in the company. And Foolproof works with big enterprise companies, including DBS itself. So one other thing about David is that he was trained as an engineer. So we're going to speak a little bit tonight about how he made his transition into user experience design. We're going to speak a little bit about his work around the region so we can learn from his research and practices. And at the same time, we'll ask him questions around anything that he's learned, right? That especially outside of Singapore, and how he sort of combines all these different interests together. So without further ado, let's start, Davey. Maybe we can start by sharing, what do you do on a daily basis as a senior consultant at Foolproof?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks again, Dylan, for really having me on this. Within Foolproof, I guess as within the Singapore office especially. So we're not a big office like our London colleagues. It's probably like a team of 16-ish growing. So what that will mean is it's really to consider how when projects come to us, consider how best to tackle it using insights and design. How do we work together with the clients? How do we show the way forward through the different activities within a project, for example? And that's from a project perspective, right? Scoping, leading. And then from within the internal practice itself in Singapore, I also create training content for specifically like how to be a UX researcher, how to be a consultant, and try to guide people through the process as well. So that's pretty much in a nutshell.
Never the same day or never a dull day.
Oh yeah, you always, the fun thing about this is that you always learn something almost every year. I won't say every day, but you learn at a frequent enough basis just based on the different types of projects, the different people you encounter. Each one of them adds a dimension to you, I suppose.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about, you actually went to engineering school, right, in university, and then somehow, or rather you ended up in design. How did that happen, and what do you think you bring to the table as sort of like learning engineering, right? And kind of in your work.
Yeah, that's I guess that's a interesting question. I guess if you say what I'll bring to the table, it's probably stories of a lot of pain. So
Stories of what people.
a lot of first-hand experiences of what went well, what didn't go well. Especially because when I started, there wasn't such a thing. The industry that you see today isn't. When I started, it wasn't like that, and I was struggling with a lot of what am I? What? How do I articulate what am I doing? What the heck am I doing? And then I believe this is the way forward, but somehow I believe this at the gut level. How do I, how do I learn? So a lot of bumbling, a lot of self-taught, a lot of just like trying new things, being really really proactive and entrepreneurial. And then I think of course you learn a lot of things you through experience from that way. So mine is the school of hard knocks. Yeah.
Awesome. And I kind of know, as I look at your background, you were first an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
I remember looking at your history, and you had an F&B startup, and yeah, you were running your own company. So what? So tell me a little bit, like that. What was that decision to like start your own company right out of engineering school?
Yeah. Okay. In essence, when at that point of time, the economy wasn't doing too well. So just for the greater context.
Oh,
And,
sounds like right now is also the same situation.
yeah, unfortunately, it seems like the 10-year cycle curse or something, you know.
Okay, got it.
So at that point in time, what presented itself to me was a business opportunity, and that business opportunity was to run a university canteen. Actually, so I won't say which canteen it is, but it's somewhere in Bukit Timah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So you rent an entire canteen, not just one store.
It's an entire canteen. So
Okay.
And the conditions for that canteen was that you had to basically operate the whole thing. You could not sublet stores out, and so that means you had to hire your own people. You have to decide the menu. You have to do it. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And the worst thing is I can't cook. Okay, so the funny thing is, at that point in time, it was a mad rush. So being fresh out of fresh out of school, I was interested in business in general.
Yeah.
But how the practical experience of operationalizing something like that, and the accounting and the finance, that was something like, whoa. I was like, yeah, just do it lah. But oh boy, there was I think the long and short of it was I went into debt like really hastily.
Okay.
And I spent 2 years trying to recover from that. Like literally trying to recover. No? So every day was basically a living hell lah.
Wow, a lot of operational issues, I guess.
A lot of, and if you know F&B, the constraints that they're facing today, it was already back then already. So you have like manpower issues all the time. You have your customers to manage, you have your schools to manage. And then part of the problems was inherent with the design of the canteen as well. So like space flow, so like menu design, so like knowing who comes to visit you at what time and what are they looking out for. So all of this, right, I made me realize one thing. If I could reverse back time, I would definitely do my research and do it in like a whole big another way. So I know that there's this argument of you try to start a business and then you try to just kind of make your way through
wing it.
Wing it, right?
Yeah.
That's fine also, but for my case, it took 2 years to make it right. And at that point in time, 2 years to make it right also meant that I also faced the dilemma in the sense that I could not expand any further because I would have to be a key, like a key in the whole cog. That's the moment you plug me out, the whole thing just
falls apart. Yeah.
So that wasn't sustainable lah. So a lot of, in essence, there was a whole huge mismatch between the business model, the customers, your various stakeholders, your environment, your processes, everything. So So yeah, engineering, yeah lah. You learn how to do charts, how to do process. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. But once reality hits the ground, right, that's your social reality there, man. It's
Okay. It's
yeah,
kind
just
of
boom.
being there. That's interesting. And right after you decide to finish like your entrepreneurial stint, you actually went into a design role, right? Like a design
Yeah,
consulting role,
yeah.
at the Awaken Group and with Su Young and team. And I was just wondering, like, what do you think are the transferable skills, or like how did you even end up getting hired as a designer? Like, yeah.
Ah, it's interesting, right? Because the thing, it's in the sense of the word, the designer isn't
Mm,
about designing something. It's not a visual design, but I am
mm,
designing something. In my day, I am designing at that point in time services,
yeah,
processes,
yeah,
how it would look like,
yeah.
and uh, I guess what really uh, transferred wasn't so much about what I learned in school. I mean, what I learned in school was still useful in the sense of logical sequences and flows.
Yeah.
But what was innately at that point in time, and I didn't quite realize it, was that I realized that I had aptitude for listening a lot, and that was on
Mm,
a much higher level than others,
mm,
than people that I know.
got it.
And it wasn't something that schools will call you out on.
Yeah.
So so and I started to think about how I could use this. How would it be different from an engineer's point of view to solve problems? So
Mm,
I like to actually share this example.
sure.
So there was this case study that I read some many years ago when I was
Mm,
still quite rather young. So imagine this problem of saving electricity. Right.
mm,
Okay. So for if you pose this to a question to an engineer, typically what an engineer does is that he would the challenge would be to optimize the circuitry in
mm.
order to help you save electricity based on mathematical values and things like that. So
Makes sense.
that's
Yeah.
the traditional road.
Yeah.
But when you pose this to a designer, so so what was really interesting was that I'm gonna share my screen right now. The designer came out with
Okay.
this in in
Oh,
in
wow.
essence, what you are seeing right here is they call this the OCD switcher.
Yeah.
So what this particular designer did was they just stayed around in homes just to observe like how people use electricity when they turn on, what are their behaviors and things like that. So
Mm,
what she found by really actually quite circumstance is that like this need for people to be I is it coherent or just to make things like neat and flush, you know. So
mm,
the how these switches work is that they are in a default position. If they're flush, it's off by default. If
mm,
you want to switch something on, you actually make the whole design like ugly lah.
mm,
So so I was like, wow, that's a really different way of approach to how you tackle a problem compared to engineering. So
mm,
nothing wrong with the school of engineering and the way it's taught,
mm.
but there is something, it's something beautiful
Yeah.
that I thought, and it's very elegantly designed without the need to go into like a lot of technical details. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that sort of opened a way for me.
Okay. Wow. So what I'm hearing you say, yes, engineers and designers think differently. Even the output and the outcome is quite different. And they have a very different way of looking at problems and solving problems. So now you've been to engineering school. You've been a designer for a number of years now. Like, and of course you've ran a business, right? Like it's kind of like the Trinity. You kind of like done what a tech startup founder should do, go through all these three things. So what how does it sort of support the work that you do today, like at Foolproof?
Mm. Well, it's actually quite I guess interesting in the sense that it does allow me to see from all sides.
Mm,
My dimensions of sight has not it's a bit it's no longer 1D lah. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So that manifests itself in how I approach my stakeholders. Really. So from a business side of things, I know that there's definitely some KPIs. I need to watch out for what KPIs are they looking out for. I also need to look out from the human angle of what's the reality on the ground and how are they going to meet this thing. What do people actually want? And then from a business side, is the business model actually right for this thing? So trying to marry all three things all into one, it's a process, or it's a journey. And I guess that's what's brought me or made me successful today, as I see it lah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's great. Would that be like any stories you could share with us, like from like the number of years you serve at Foolproof, is if nothing is too sensitive? Yeah. Any interesting insights that you discovered from your research, or any stories you can tell?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's plenty of stories, right? I'm trying to think about.
I'm sure. I mean, it's almost more than 5 years now.
Yeah. I mean, the most often one that I often repeat is, you know how sometimes global companies have there's always an inherent tension when they try to release a product globally. And that is this tension between a global design governance standard versus a local version of whatever that they're trying to do. Right? So it was the same case for, usually when you actually have a global client like that, this is the first thing you actually need to watch out for. And that's the first thing you need to reconcile. So yeah, true enough, this client, it's a rather large FMCG, wanted to build an e-commerce platform. And then decided to, the strategy was to pilot in one country and then roll it out across many. And then maybe just use that base design and then localize along the way. So what then happened was we got involved trying to validate these things in the different markets. So I flew to quite a number of countries in Southeast Asia, even Russia and Brazil, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. So trying to understand what is the culture of the day, what do people actually do, what's the business context in which this design sits in. So I think one thing to note is that design never sits alone. It always sits in some kind of ecosystem. You need to understand how design can unlock the entire system or change it completely. So in order for it to bring value lah. So what happened was, in some countries, right, actually the way they order stuff, it's not even computers or even an e-commerce system. Because e-commerce system, the idea of that is actually a very Western idea, to be honest. But once it comes to, say, even places like China, you know how people are ordering through the phone, WeChat.
Yeah, through WeChat. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have something like in between, like Vietnam and Indonesia, whereby actually the signs are already there that people are beginning to use WhatsApp more. It's no longer just a communication tool. It's even an ordering tool for.
So it's chat commerce. It's not online on a website, but via chat.
Yeah, it's not. So that was one of the things in terms of the social reality that we had to bring to a client, in the sense that, hey, you do this e-commerce thing. It's I know you've invested a lot of budget. You pitch to CEO. You got like this this amount of money to spend, and you have to justify. But then I understand that. So how can we make this a version 2?
Right.
Yeah. So it's also, I guess it's also not to say that you have to tell the truth, but you also have to tell the truth from an angle of where they're coming from and what's their trajectory going to be. So it's harnessing all sides. Yeah.
Did they take your advice in the end, or your team's advice?
I think so. I think they are using that as a sort of a version 2. I mean, I guess what's also interesting, right? In one of the countries, we found that there was a very high use I mean, basically mobile commerce lah. And then we were saying that, hey, actually this commerce platform can be on mobile. You know why? Then the shopkeepers were like, no, I don't want to use this. Then so we couldn't understand why. And honestly, if as a consultant you just go back to your client and say that the client, they just don't say they don't want, you're not gonna get very far lah. So the answer actually lay in other parts of the ecosystem. So in this part of the ecosystem, we found it through the distributors who were distributing to them. Now, what was happening was that the distributors, all in the particular country, how they kept records was through a book, and everything was handed in cash. Now, this particular text, so what happened was, I just recall in that day of research, I stepped in the room, and it was like a scene of a movie, okay? So this guy was just like a table and had wads of cash, like in 100,000 USD. And it's like
just like those movies where it's like Narcos, right?
Yeah,
piles and piles of cash, right?
Piles of cash. Okay. It's like, wow. I mean, these guys spend a lot, and they're all still very reliant on cash.
Okay.
Then it's like trying to understand, why is this phenomenon like that? What's driving this?
Yeah.
And then interestingly, one of the reasons, if you understand the story of that whole book and cash, is that this country wanted to hide. The transactions are always hidden.
Right.
Yeah. Because of corruption, because of what? So the idea of trust between two parties is not something published. It's kept as a secret within the two things.
Yeah. So there's no record. There's no black and white.
There's no black and white.
There's no paper trail. The only paper trail is the book. Yeah.
So if you know e-commerce platforms, right, they all have audit trails. They have paper trails.
Yeah.
So that was one of the chief reasons why people didn't want to use e-commerce for business. Right. It's like, wow, this is a bit of a mind blower. Like, who could have thought? So the design challenge now becomes very different, really, right? So So how do you like introduce safety to this e-commerce platform? So again, it's in other countries you may not have this, but in this particular country you have. So again, the whole global and local adjustment that needs to happen. Takes place.
What did you guys end up proposing then? Like, did you ask the client, hey, you should give up this market because like people don't change, or did you say, hey, I think you should reconsider reframing the entire problem and rethinking how you should design a product for this market?
It's more the latter. It's probably how you design, because the thing is, the market is too lucrative.
I see.
Yeah, it's too big. You can't ignore. But this problem also happens at the scale of your lucrativeness, you know. So
yeah, that's some really interesting insight, because like if you look at Western economies, like this idea of corruption seems like a very far-fetched concept, right? But it's very real in Southeast Asia. Like some countries are run by corruption, right? It's the truth and it's the reality of it. So how do we design around that? It's not a problem that they write in universities at all, right? And it's not something people talk about either.
No.
So that's something you kind of do, and you get that feel inside, and that's something really interesting. Well, I mean, Wichu from our Zoom chat is saying, thanks for sharing. This is really great. Yeah.
No problem, Wichu.
Yeah, no problem. And for those who just joined in our Facebook Live, we have David Khoo over here, Senior Consultant at Foolproof, a user experience design practice based in London and in Singapore. So I wanted to just ask, like, are there any other stories or insights that you have from your course of work? Yeah.
Well, literally, I'm exploring sense making. I won't say like it's like a project, but I'm exploring the pattern and the process of how people sense make actually. So
Tell us more. What is the definition of sense making? Yeah, for those who are not familiar with it.
so well, I'll try to explain it as best as I can, because
Sure.
actually material outside, it's not really there.
Yeah.
It's so sense making. Some people call this analysis. Some
Yeah.
people call this synthesis.
Yeah.
But I call it sense making, because the idea is that you got a lot of after you do like whatever research work you got a lot of insights. But the whole process of you now having this huge chunk of data, you are trying to sense make of make sense of what this, and understand what's the frame that's relevant. How do you
Mm.
and what's the problem that's apparent from this, and sense making has a lot to do with personal judgment. How to how do you determine which is the right problem to do, for example. So yeah, what sense making would I hopefully do for you is that it helps you to make connections that you of seemingly unrelated things that turn out to be like really really important. And that's the end goal of sense making, which is crucial. The crucial input before you go, actually during the design phase even.
Yep.
Um,
Agreed. It's kind of you. Yeah. If I understand what you're saying correctly, it's making sense of what the data that you collected, essentially. And you're saying it's kind of like your research interest right now. So tell us a little bit more. What's going on?
mm. So the thing about sense making is, or what's happening in the UX industry, right? Is like, if you want to advocate for time on a client project to do sense making, right? A client say, "Why am I paying this?" This like,
Yeah, shouldn't you
yeah,
do
like,
this?
yeah,
Like,
shouldn't do this.
shouldn't it be automatic that you're to give me advice, right? Yeah.
Or yeah, so the whole process is actually disregarded. But in order for good design to come, you need data and you need a time to stew before you
Correct.
get to that. That's
Yeah.
and so this part is always invisible to the client.
Mm.
And unfortunately, also, like most practices, the journey is that, okay, I see you got a lot of data, you do, and then like you got these teams, and then like how the heck do you get to that design there? It's like, how, yeah, so it's like almost magical for people if they are not part of the process, but for the designer it is a legit process of how you
Mm.
get from point A to point B to point C.
Mm.
So hence this mystery, this part art, part science really fascinates me right now. Like
Yeah.
I know I do it. I know people do it, but how do I do it? How do you do it?
How do other people do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So how do you do it, or what have you found to be the best way you do it? And then maybe I'll share a little bit of what I know.
Mm.
Yeah.
So the thing about sense making, I do come to realize that it's a team sport.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
The
Good start.
number one, because the
Mm.
thing is, sense making is, number one, it's highly subjective. It is highly subjective on whatever background you come from and whatever frame you
Mm.
come. An engineer is going to make sense of things very differently from how a designer makes sense of things. So in that, for example,
Mm.
so no, that's number one.
Yeah.
Now, so and number two is sense making. The is also in a way determined by uh, texture, data texture. How easy you make for yourself lah. How do you like
Mm.
analyze things? So
Yeah.
yeah, the one of the problems that of today, if you are working remotely, is that you all suddenly have access to digital tools, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what happens for digital tools is that you can only input text most of the time. You can't have
Mm.
drawings, you can't have pictures, you can't have things like
Yeah.
that. That makes
Yeah.
it, and if you're actually like looking at large amounts of data,
Yeah.
it's all going to appear really flat to you and appear
Mm.
flat to everybody else. So what's
Mm.
going to happen is that you can only get so far to a layer depth.
Mm.
So the thing is, if you incorporate like so there really is a reason for why you write big on post-its lah. And why you write legibly and why you tend to mix it up with drawings and all that is because your human mind.
And one idea per post-it and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, the longest time I tried to explain to this client, like, why? Like, okay, of course nobody asked me why lah, but of course the rules you were broken unsaid, you know.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So
yeah, those two are interesting. And if I understand what you meant by data texture, like I think what you're trying to say is how it sort of stands out, or how is it like different from the rest? Is am I correct on that front?
Yeah, it's different. So if the problem is if everything is too flat, you'll find it hard to make sense. So so this is just some, like, I mean, there's probably a lot.
I'm sure there's more. I'm sure we can write a book about it, but I was just interested to know yours. The one thing I discovered as an educator teaching this process called sense making is that different people think, yes, you're right, different people think differently, and different people are more comfortable thinking in a certain modality. So for example, when I get some of my students to go through like a list of questions, right? And this list of questions guide them through the process of like making sense of that data, like making some inference bit by bit. Oh, this is how you think about the problem from this angle, like step by step. Some people tend to do better at it. Some people tend to not so well at it, and they get sleepy and they get bored. So that's one. But then let's say I change it to like a thematic analysis, like we're playing with post-its and we're using tactile touch over here, and we're rearranging with our hands. Suddenly there's this tactile memory and there's this like tactile experience, and some people really thrive in that. Like they start seeing patterns that they don't see looking at a sheet of paper or looking at a computer screen.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was something I discovered while conducting and facilitating these that really helped with the sense making process. The other one that I usually advocate is like, the data texture bit is correct, but I also say, hey, what's immediately obvious here, but what's also not immediately like obvious here, right? Like, what are we not seeing from the stuff that's like surfacing over here? So like, it's kind of like an inversion technique.
Yeah, super useful.
Yeah. So that those are some of my best practices. I'm sure there's a ton of them, but yeah, probably it's worth an article of its own. So thanks for sharing, David. That's really wonderful. I was just wondering, is there any questions from the crowd tonight? It seems like everyone seems pretty entranced by the stories thus far, and we want to like take one or two questions from the crowd. But there's a classic question, David, I would ask you, which is like, what would your advice be to like someone who's not a designer, who's not a UX designer right now?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how can they like sort of transition successfully into this field, right? Now you have gone through that process of like transformation, you're already practicing it. Yeah, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I would say that it does look like it's a very big wall in front of you for new beginners or for people who look like they're gonna transition. But the fact is, a lot of us are actually still sense making our way through. There is a lot of courses now, more than when I first started in my time. But
fully agree.
But the thing is that again, if I were to say that there's a lot of courses, there's a lot of access for you to go and review the content, to go and learn a bit and try. Maybe I would say that if you really just want to do something, just practice whatever opportunity that you have, and then try to practice it. It doesn't have to come from a corporate context. can be from your family, how you design a date, how you design if you're a parent, how do you design a time with your child that's going to be special. So all these moments, if you they seem insignificant and they seem like nobody's watching, but those are the best moments to try to practice something. So
so it's kind of integrating like design it into your life, not just like treating it like separately as something else that I have to like follow step by step as a checklist, but kind of challenging ourselves to think about, hey, this could be a design challenge. How am I gonna like solve it? Am I hearing it correctly?
Because the thing right now for new people is that you think that the opportunities are only going to come in a specific format, and that there's no way to practice. But that's not true. The opportunities are abundant. I mean that's one way. The other one is I'm pretty sure that there's like UX communities and out there that's looking for volunteers. As you volunteer in these things, you would also learn how people speak, how people think, and how people do. But I would say on top of that, you probably have some innate skills already. It's not that you're starting from zero. Just that you might need practice to bring it up to a much to a higher level for it to work properly lah. So for example, like listening. How do you listen, like being still and listen for 1 hour straight without and learning how to take notes, for example? Those are critical skills for UX designers.
Without judgment.
Without judgment. And because what you're going to find is that sitting still is actually hard. Without practice, like you're gonna have like all these thoughts like bzz, 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 like super noisy in your head, you know. So even that requires like a lot of hours of practice. So the thing is, you take all these things, you prepare now, so that when it's show time, you can show it. And it doesn't that it's all in the works. It's all your CV stuff in the works. These are your intangible skills.
Yeah, it's a good point. I never actually thought about that. Like I do it quite naturally, so I sometimes I assume people can do it too. But you're right. It does take practice to be still and to be non-judgmental and to really listen and be present and not just kind of filter ideas and stuff like that as we're listening. So that's really good advice. I appreciate that. And yeah, so I was just wondering one other thing as you've been working for Foolproof, and one of the interesting things about this agency or this practice that you work for, practice lab that you work for, is the ability to cross-pollinate with London, right? So I'm just curious, like what's the difference you found from working in London or with London clients? I'm not sure if you had that opportunity, but like what are you seeing from this experience working across culture in London and Singapore?
Yeah. Okay. I think if you talk about this is a bit of West versus East as well. In a sense that I guess some of you might already know this, but the design maturity there is higher.
For sure.
In a sense. So the battles that you have to fight is also different. So while in over there, it's almost like you can say, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, and oh yeah, the client will be like, oh yeah, fine. Here you got to explain a ton. So whether you realize it or not, that's going to make you a better consultant. Well, in my role, it made me a better consultant because you actually have to go through the hoops. You actually have to build your foundations really right. You have to justify everything, got to understand everything. So so I don't find it necessarily a bad thing because it solidifies your foundations by having to do this all the time. So that's one. I think the other one is what's also maybe a bit more interesting is that how this part of the world, the designs are starting to break away from the traditional Western designs.
Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, like, okay, it's like China e-commerce, right? Like how all these like crazy 1111 sales, like
Yeah.
11 and
10,
how
10, 11, 11,
and,
12, 12.
yeah, the way e-commerce is done in China, for example,
Yeah.
completely negates the need for a website. In many ways, because usually you go to, so for example, you go to product site to look at the brands. You're trying to do a few things really. You're trying to get a source of authenticity. You want to make sure that this thing is good. There's reviews. In a Chinese e-commerce site, that thing all gets rolled into one in a mobile application. And then if you ask the Chinese consumer go back to website, they're like, huh? They're like,
That's like taking a step backwards.
yeah. So
Interesting.
the sensibilities are becoming different, and that becomes a point of interest between like both sides of the world. Like, hey, actually we're seeing this. Is there something that you think that could come your way? And then like from the West, it would be of course the more of the design maturity, where you're looking into maybe things like ethics, design ethics. Maybe you're looking into things like how governance models and all these
Or
for
even like privacy, for example, and all those issues. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Never actually thought of it this way. And yeah, it's kind of like you put maybe the same bacteria in like two different petri dishes, and like they give like completely different results.
yeah.
Yeah. And one of the petri dish is like more mature, right, than the other one, but still the one that's less mature still has like really interesting things going on, and the cross pollination of it is quite fascinating, considering how even designing for China is a practice of its own, right?
Totally.
I once remembered someone. I think it was this guy called Dan Grover, right? He's a product manager for WeChat for a period of time, and he was writing about all these UX design practices in China for the English audience, which I haven't seen anyone write like that since he left WeChat for Facebook, right? And the interesting thing is, because Facebook wanted to be a super app, so they hired him because they saw like WeChat, this is like the future. We're gonna be like WeChat and start doing social commerce and stuff like that, which we're starting to see how Facebook as a product is evolving towards that direction. So yeah, there's so many things that's going on in China that's entirely like sort of on its own trajectory right now. And
True. And that's
yeah,
what
can you tell us more? Like, it sounds like you've done some work in China. We have some people here who are interested to work in China. So I was just wondering if you have any more to share about China.
well, not a whole lot. I guess the very China is hard to talk about. It's if you really want to like like
Dig deep.
do stuff there,
Yeah,
actually go there. It's what I would say in terms of advice.
for sure.
Like, because what is happening is a whole ecosystem approach to things. It's
Yeah.
not a singular product, and it's powerful in that way.
Mm.
So the thing also is that the experiences, it's hard to talk about. What you're likely find is that because you're plugged into a thing, and that thing is so starkly different from your world, you will learn a ton more things faster than just me saying lah. So if you don't know about China, just try using their chat commerce. Just try
Yeah, like ordering something.
yeah, just try ordering something. Even right now, it's so advanced where you could just put your phone in a group of friends, and the AI systems are like listening in and can actually recommend like really really decent stuff, and you actually can't really tell that it's not a person. If it, I mean, the voice ordering,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
can't really tell. So it's a bit of a like, okay, like, wow.
Yeah, it's very, very evolved. I want to kind of like dive deeper on something you just said, which is about like it behaves like an ecosystem. Can you elaborate on that and maybe give some examples? What do you mean by, yeah, it's like designing for an ecosystem, or it's behaving like an ecosystem? Just, yeah, share a little bit more on that.
Mm. Well, specifically for China, right? So
Mm,
you know how mobile payments
yeah.
linking together with e-commerce, linking together with live stream, linking together with how they pull
Mm,
product reviews, linking together with how they work with distributors to activate whatever campaigns, channels, whatsoever.
mm,
So so yeah, so it's far more complex in that way, but
I
also
see.
far far more fun. Maybe the skill of the next age is really systems, like designing whole of actually ecosystems,
I
how
believe
they
so.
actually work. Because right now, like things are like, kind of silo and everything all together,
Are disconnected. Yeah.
disconnected. And what's also likely going to happen is that you are going to introduce the lens of sustainability. Then,
Mm.
whoa, then once that thing comes in, it's like, whoa, you are looking at the entire supply chain, and that's actually show some in some sense it's already coming up lah. So for example, like
Mm.
the most apparent is in food, like
Mm.
where the food is sourced from and how people want to know, and then it goes all the way through.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a lot of room for us designers to grow and in different skill sets, but it also sounds like there's different use cases beyond just designing apps or designing websites. It looks like we can actually maybe even start designing value chains and
Yeah.
designing ecosystems uh, in some ways. That's great. So David would have a question from the audience, and Majin thanks you for sharing. And she mentioned there are different battles that you fight in your UX journey. Is there a very memorable one that solidified your foundation? Was there one that really defined you as a person?
Wow, tough man. It's like so many.
So many fights
Oh
you've gone
God.
through. All the bruises, like you just just show your scars.
Yeah. A memorable. There's probably a lot.
Okay.
I
Or
guess,
some that's easy to share or comfortable to share. Yeah.
yeah. The I guess one thing that I often get stung with is uh, I already knew this coming from a client or something like this. And
Though the client tells you, I already knew this.
I already knew this. Why you tell me this for what?
Shit, we get
so,
that.
so
We get that a lot. Like I hear
yeah,
that a lot too. Yes. Okay.
this isn't purely related to UX, but
Yeah.
it did help me to learn how to frame things
Mm.
a lot better. So I think for me that's the worst thing that I could hear as a consultant. It's like,
Yeah, you spend like hours on the research, and then the
like
client tells you this.
yeah, why are you telling me this? So it's either a few things. It's either I am replicating a previously done thing
Mm.
that I didn't know I was replicating. Or number two is there is a problem with the way I'm articulating it, such that you are not really seeing the point. So it's
Mm.
usually either of these two,
Mm.
but more often than not, I mean, so I yeah lah. So in the beginning days, I had to work on the latter, but
Okay.
nowadays I'm working on the former.
Okay.
So in a sense, UX, so like championing, like the role that I play as a consultant, if you think about it, the responsibility is quite heavy lah. In a sense that there is a moral
Mm.
obligation for you to represent the voice of your customers well, because nobody else is really
For
hearing
sure.
whatever they're saying.
Always. Always.
So
Yeah.
so that is the heart of you being a UX designer. But of
Mm.
course, you also don't want to be like somebody who is not savvy with the ongoings of whatever current situation, political situation sometimes that you are reading. So it's in essence you have to learn how to read the undercurrents pretty well
When we're saying political situation, we're saying political situation in the organization.
in organizations that you are working
Mm.
with. Yeah,
Okay.
or whatever. Yeah, the thing I come to realize is that the work that I do is actually intervention to organizations. Why? Because sometimes the things that you're bringing forward is extremely existential to a company. It's like, why do you even exist? And therefore, if you were the on other side of the receiving end, you receive something. Why are you born? Whoa! It's like
It's like a whole identity crisis.
it puts you in an identity crisis, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
so you need to understand like these things, like what to watch out for,
And how to convey it gently to them.
how to sometimes it's not gentle, sometimes it is
It's forceful.
forceful, but in essence it's a bit like a kung fu master in the sense you know how to be soft and when to be hard.
That's
And
good.
that's something that you could probably go through. Like I can't think of anything better than experience lah. Then just knocking it through. So that's something that, in a way, because of that remark, forced me on a whole different trajectory of um of trying to like do better lah. Because you know that feeling that's very sucky when you get like, always like yeah, tell me something I don't know. It makes you feel really stupid, right? And I know nobody wants to feel that way.
Yeah,
So
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so what is your first response when someone says, I already know this? Like how yeah, because I'm also asking for some of the people here, because I get this sometimes. Yeah. So what's your first response?
could you share with me more? Yeah, because I really want to learn from you what you're saying. So at that point in time, the other skill is not to over time not to take it too personally, and also recognize that they have a different lens. What is you are again, because this whole thing is subjective to a certain extent. You are bringing in a lens. They are coming in with a lens. Try to understand what that lens is. So treat it like so sometimes the advice I give is like treat this like a user testing session. You put something out there, it lands, it doesn't land, you note the result. So
be completely objective about it.
that's the mental model that I have when I'm in this situation. That's how I learn how to cope. I just see it as a user testing.
Okay.
Yeah, so
that's good advice. Yeah, we see Li Yuan giving the thumbs up in our Zoom chat, so that's really wonderful. I think one other thing that's rather interesting that I think you could share that maybe no other people have interviewed thus far could share is the idea of being a consultant, right? You're working with different clients. You're outside of the organization. You have a different stake in the business. You're not in the organization. So what would you say you have to do really well as a consultant, that maybe if you're part of the team internally, it's a lot easier. And I'm hearing from some of the things you said earlier, one thing was related to communication, and this was an early part of your career, right?
Yeah. So the thing about consultants, I'm pretty sure you heard the I mean this phrase, right? Like, well, I just hired a consultant. The consultant took my watch and told me the time.
I heard of that. Yes.
So so that is unfortunately sometimes true. But you also need to understand that the role of a consultant sometimes play is that sometimes or rather the state of design today is that a lot of design are brought in-house. But then when you bring a design in-house, what actually happens is that the form changes somewhat, in a sense that you don't really have the ability to question certain things. Whereas a consultant can actually say all kinds of things he wants. You can basically talk a lot more and ask annoying questions. That's sometimes what I do. So the thing to really present yourself well is number one, they are engaging me to try to find out what their customers are doing and thinking and designing something for them. But on my hand, I'm also learning about you. I'm learning about what you can take, what you cannot take, what is existential for you, what you can't. I'm trying to learn what have you done before and how do I build upon this? How do I be a true collaborator to you rather than be an enemy to you? How do I quickly establish myself in that capacity as what somebody is working alongside you, but who's also comfortable enough to tell you what you need to hear? How do I build trust in the shortest amount of time?
I think that's a great way to share it and say it. Do you have maybe one or two advice on how we could build trust very quickly in a short amount of time?
So when you are junior, obviously it's going to come with how well they perceive you in terms of your skills. That's so that has to come forth. When you are a bit more senior and when your skills isn't an issue anymore, it's about how well you can identify with them, with their problem.
So it shows whether you're listening.
It shows whether you're listening. And you should I mean, yeah lah. So sometimes in the work you brand things like stakeholder interviews, but actually it's really a time to just really listen and how in a way you make sure you listen, you make sure that you demonstrate your competency in ways you bring them what they need to know and more, probably.
Adding value.
You add value, you map things for them. So actually a lot of problems is that people have a resistance to drawing whatever they're thinking. And suddenly you draw things out, then they're like, "What? What's this? This is like amazing." Yeah, so it's like it's not and drawing is a skill a child knows, right?
Exactly. But it is fascinating. I recall when I was interviewing someone quite senior, just on behalf of a company I used to work for, and there was a candidate who didn't draw, and there was a candidate who started drawing in his notebook. And I was like, okay, he sounds more believable. I get what he's saying. And I think even as teachers, right, even as an educator, I try and write on the board. I try and like draw things and denote relationship, and people seem to really just listen more.
Yeah. And the thing about drawing, it also invites them to participate.
Okay, that sounds good.
It really does. So in a sense, you elevate yourself from being a order taker, really, like I tell you what you do, versus a true collaborator. So it's a lot of these like little things.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have one last question. We'll take that last question from the crowd who was sent by private message, so I wouldn't review the name. So someone here seems to be interested in joining Foolproof.
Oh, okay.
So does Foolproof differentiate user experience researchers versus user experience designers? Yeah.
I mean, by definition of role, right? One would focus more on visuals, and one would focus more on the research aspect. By definition, that's the sort of your beginning, your primary skill set. But then the thing is, we have researchers who can do design, and then honestly, some consultants who can also do like a bunch of design. And I mean, sorry, I said designers who can do research. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So the way we are set out is we recognize that the role is the title you have a bunch of core skills, you have a bunch of secondary skills, and you as and when a project requires these things, you can be on the team, and the role doesn't really matter as much as what the team agrees what you are all doing,
what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah, and how you're working. So it's I guess that's how it works lah.
Okay, so there's a second part to the question. So she's asking, how valuable would it be to have business know-how when transitioning into the field of UX?
when you're transitioning, you may not start off with business know-how, but you can surely pick it up along the way. The thing you need to realize that the design sits, the foundation layer is often a business layer. At some point in time, your design, you will interrogate the business itself, like, why are you doing this? And so whether you like it or not, you will be interacting with that. So you can you can pick up from that way lah, but it's a passage of time.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a fair question. I'm trained in business as well, so I'll share that I guess it just like what David said earlier, it helps you relate better with your business stakeholders, and you can code switch and you can speak their language. It helps you be more effective in some situation. Is it necessary to have a business degree? No. Is it necessary to have an interest? Yes. I think it really helps to just generally be curious and interested in the business, especially if you're a consultant, right? Or even if you're applying for any role. Anyway, just one last question. Any parting advice or any words you want to share with our community here? Before we sort of like end this interview or Facebook Live.
There's probably tons to share, really. Not enough
Sure.
time. But I would say the power of diversity, embrace it. And so this is thing. So I was earlier talking about sense making and how sense making is a team sport, right? The thing is, if you do things on your own, it's just going to be one dimensional. No matter how you view it, it's just you and your thoughts. When you truly embrace diversity, and diversity doesn't mean that it has to be harmonious all the time. It means that you have allow yourself to have the flexibility and the capacity to hold a tensionist point of view sometimes, and somehow and fold that thought. And that's going to make your designs a lot better, and not just your designs, even your professional or your personal life even a lot better when you learn how to live with these things and embrace somebody who's like really different way of thinking and point of view.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant, and I think Aristotle once said it is the mark of an educated mind to entertain a thought without accepting it. So I think it's also being educated means you're able to hold different perspectives and able to understand that. So that's really good advice. And in general, being able to work in a team helps solve a lot of blind spots that we have as individuals, as a person. So yeah, it's great. Thank you so much, David. It's been wonderful, and the lessons you've shared, I'm sure it's been helpful. And for those of you who are in the video call in Zoom, please type in chat if this has been useful. Please thank David for his time and maybe share a little bit about what you learned. And at the same time, David, what's the best way to connect with you? Is it over LinkedIn?
I'll put in my LinkedIn in the chat. That's a sure way to connect with me lah. I know I'm pretty bad with like connecting.
checking on LinkedIn.
Or just like connecting in general, because
because you're spending time doing research, but that's all good. So for those of you who are on Facebook Live, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have enjoyed our little live stream over here. Next week, I will be doing an Ask Me Anything, just to answer some of the questions I've been receiving from people all over the world on UX and how to transition over there. So I'm going to answer those questions live, and feel free to come with questions. I'm going to answer them directly as well. But we will come back with guests. It's just that, I thought I've received a bunch of questions, so I'll do an Ask Me Anything session. David, thank you so much. David has put his LinkedIn, and he says, feel free to connect. Thank you everyone for being here. And we're receiving a lot of positive feedback about how insightful this session is, and listening, the importance of listening and all of that. Thank you so much for attending. And David, if you're staying for a couple of minutes, not sure, some people might want to have a chat with you. Just kind of like a real event. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, sure.
All right.
I've got time. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Good night. For those who are logging off, I'll see you again.